Today I'm going to build and paint the superior siege weapon, a Trebuchet, for the lady. I'm Angela and welcome to Hobby Night. The Old World is returning this month and I've already pre-ordered my Bretonnian box set. However, I have some Bretonnians sitting at home waiting for paint, and I think now is the appropriate time to actually get working on them, because you see, in this old Bretonnian box set that I have, there is a Trebuchet, which is a perfect siege weapon to add to my army. I'm really excited about this, and it is a fully metal kit, which I've never worked with before. So without further ado, let's go ahead and start by getting the Trebuchet prepped, and then we'll get it painted. The first step when dealing with these metal miniatures is to clean up all the flash that would be on the models. This takes a bit of time, but thankfully I was live with my chat and they kept me company while I took care of this step. Once I was satisfied with having removed as much of the flash that I could find, I decided to do a little bit of a test fit to see which of the elements might actually need pinning or not. I know that metal miniatures often do require pinning because of the weight of some of the pieces, but I didn't want to feel like I had to pin everything, so that's why I did my little test fit. And I ultimately found that there were 3 sections that I needed to pin: the 2 hand wheels on the side of the Trebuchet, as well as the counterweight that attaches to the arm. I really especially needed to pin the counterweight. It is super heavy and it's up in the air, and I just don't think the glue, even with some accelerant to help seal it faster, was going to hold it well enough. So the first step when we need to pin these items is to first find our center where we want to put our pin. Once I've done that, we're going to use varying drill bits, starting with the smallest one and working our way up so that we can increase the size of the hole where the pin will fit. Now, what I'm using for pins is just paper clips. It's what I had laying around and was easily available, and it's pretty cheap to get your hands on, but you can use other bits of metal that you have available as well. I cut the pins down to a specific size, something that I knew would be larger than what I would need, and stuck one side into the hole once I had got it drilled out, glued it in place, using the accelerant to speed up that process, because I found out during this entire assembly process that glue attaching metal to metal takes a really long time to actually cure. Once I had the pin in one side of the piece that I needed to pin, I got the other side ready the exact same way and then attached them using glue once again and the accelerant to speed up that process. Once I had everything pinned together, and I was pretty happy with how my pinning actually went. I've never done that before, really, and I was very satisfied with the 3 that I did. But once I had everything together, the rest of the assembly was pretty straightforward. Everything went together with just glue, the accelerant, it all sealed together very fast. But I did notice that as I was trying to get some things straight and in position so that they would align, I did have some gaps near the bottom where the portions connect to each other. And that is where I pulled out my green stuff. Now, I haven't used green stuff in a while on the channel, but it's pretty straightforward to work with, and you can use whatever putty you like, but I like the green stuff because it was a bit firmer here, and I felt like it was just a little bit more straightforward for me doing this simple gap filling. I mixed the 2 parts together, equal half of the blue and the yellow, until they were a deep green. And then I spent some time just filling all those gaps, not really doing too much sculpting, although I did have to sculpt a couple of little U-rings just to make sure everything was connected to each other. But other than that, it was a very smooth process, and I really actually enjoy working with green stuff more than I realized. I might try doing some more sculpting in the future. Once everything was assembled, we could finally get everything primed, so let's go ahead and work on that next. Hey guys, just jumping into the video to remind you to hit that subscribe button and bell icon for notifications so you never miss future content on the channel. And if you're into the spicier side of the hobby, you can find a link to my Only Fanatics down in the link tree below in the description. Now, let's go ahead and get back to the video. After washing the models with a bit of soap and water to get any of that release agent off of it, because I don't know how long that stuff lasts and I know that these have it on it, we're going to prime up the models using a medium gray tone. Now, I want to still try using contrast paint on these metal miniatures because I've never done that before, and I don't know how it's going to work on these particular metal miniatures because they're so big and they're entirely metal, and I just want to see what it looks like. They've got some really deep recesses. I think it could be fun. So we're going to go with a grisaille technique to make sure that our contrast colors can actually show up on these metal miniatures. With our gray prime done, we're going to come in with first a wash using a dark brown color tone over the entirety of the Trebuchet. Since it's going to be mostly brown, I figured a brown wash would be a good way to get us started. Then for the people and the rocks, I'm going with a Nuln Oil wash. I wanted them to feel a little bit grittier, a bit grimier than the Trebuchet, which might be kept in a bit of better condition because these guys are just peasants, and I don't really think the Lords of Bretonnia care so much about them. So that's why we're going with the Nuln Oil wash. Once both of those washes are dried, we're gonna come back in with some dry brushing to create some highlights. I'm going to start with a light orange-brown color tone that I got from Duncan Rhodes' collection and use this on both the Trebuchet as well as all the people. Since this color palette's going to have so much brown in it, I thought this light warm brown color would already emphasize that and start bringing those colors to life. And I really, really like the look of this. Then once I'm done with that, we're gonna come back in and start mixing some white into that same color tone, lightening it up until I'm satisfied with the way that the highlights are looking. Then we're gonna turn our attention to the stones. These are going to get a standard light gray into white dry brush to give us the exact same effect, but keep it a little bit cooler so that they actually look like stone. And frankly, this is pretty much all I'm going to be doing to the stones because I think they look pretty darn good already. And that's one thing done, just a bunch more things left to do. It's time to work on those dirty, dirty peasants. And for these guys, I'm sticking to a predominantly brown color scheme, which is kind of what I'm doing for this entire thing, but I am going to throw in a splash of color. Now, the majority of the work on their clothes was done live on my channel where I was hanging out with chat and we got to discuss the Bretonnians. We got really excited about the old world and oh my gosh, I'm so ready for it to be here. And I really had fun painting these guys live with you all. It was just a blast. Now, I was specifically working with those browns, but I did decide to pull a little bit of color in because I just really like color and I can't help myself. So I decided to pull in some yellows, some greens, and then a little bit of a light blue. I thought these would be colors that the peasants might actually be able to afford the dyes of, instead of going with some of the more vibrant color tones like I normally do, like reds and purples, which are definitely more for the royalty of the Bretonnia. And I just think this is super appropriate. Once we're done with the clothes, we have to take care of a couple of accessories, which means we go back to the brown tones, but we do throw in a couple of metallics here and there, pulling out a nice steel color tone for all of those metal tools. Now we have to move on to their faces. And here is where I didn't have as much confidence as I was hoping, but I think I actually did a really good job at the end. I took my time here. I'm not very strong with my face game, but I had a plan. We're going to go in first with some contrast color, whatever flesh tone you might want to use. I chose a couple of different color tones because I wanted the characters to have a bit of variety to them. So we applied that, let it dry, and then we came back in, and because of my grisaille, I actually had some really nice natural highlights already, which I used to follow and highlight additionally with a lighter opaque skin tone. Now, this was working pretty well, but I felt like I had too strong of a sharp contrast between my shadows and my highlights. So in order to fix that and give myself some midtones to work with, I decided to mix the contrast color in with my opaque paints and give me a really, really nice midtone. I blended this a few times, going back and forth between the midtone and the highlight color until I was satisfied. And now I have 5 peasants actually, because of the kid, that I'm actually very satisfied on how they turned out when it comes to their faces. These are probably some of the best faces I've ever painted. Happy with those, let's go ahead and move on to their hair. For this, I'm going to use a couple of just natural color tones for their hair, adding a little bit of variety and mixing it up here and there just to, again, give them some unique identity. Once we're done with the hair, the last thing to take care of is the wheelbarrow. Now, I've been saving this till last because I'm kind of using it as a test to see what brown I want to use on the trebuchet. And ultimately, I decided to go with wildwood. I absolutely love the way that this dark brown color tone settles into all the recesses and allows the highlights that I did earlier to stand out and shine beautifully. The final thing to take care of on the peasants, now that I'm satisfied with the wheelbarrow, is to dirt their bases. And this is me using a new product that I've never used before. It's AK Diorama's texture paints, and I really, really like them. You can apply them with a brush, which I think just makes it a lot easier to tackle, and I love the way that they dry. So I'm very satisfied with these, and I'll probably be using them a lot more on the channel. It's time to work on our siege weapon. I really like the way the wildwood worked on the wheelbarrow, so we're going to apply that to all of the wood tones on our trebuchet. And when I'm done with this, I'm looking at it and I'm not nearly as happy with it as I was the wheelbarrow. I guess I just must not have highlighted the trebuchet as much as I did the figures originally, because things aren't just standing out as much as I want to. But that's okay, that's okay. We can come back in and we'll just do some more dry brushing and bring those highlights out one more time. This takes a little bit of time. I use a mid-tone brown first and then mix that mid-tone brown in with the same light orange brown that I used originally until I'm satisfied with the highlights. And finally, it's looking really good and that wood is standing out beautifully. So we can actually move on to some of the other elements on the trebuchet. First up, the ropes. These are going to be done up in Agros Dune to give us a nice sort of sandy yellow color tone. Then we're going to focus on the leather, which is going to get a bit of dark oath flesh. I love this color tone. It just makes it stand out really well. And I use the same color on the peasants. I just think helps tie everything together. Now we need to take care of all of the metal pieces on this trebuchet. There are a lot. There are a lot of nails, there's a lot of fastenings, there's a lot of clips, lots and lots of metal pieces holding this whole thing together, including a bunch of decorative pieces like shields as well as fleur-de-lis. And we want to make sure all of them are painted up in a nice steel color tone. The exact same steel color tone that I used on the peasants. Again, this is just to help tie everything together and make it feel a bit more unified. Once I'm done with all the metal, we can move on to working on the shrines. There are 2 shrines on either side of the trebuchet. One features a knight and the other features the lady. For the lady, I'm going to paint her up in a light blue color tone because I often see pictures of her wearing blue robes and I just thought it might be appropriate. For the candles, we're going to come in with a little bit of an off-white to help them stand out a bit more. And then for the knight on the other shrine, he's going to get the same colors we're going to put on the shield, a nice blue as well as a red. This will be the colors of the lord that owns this particular trebuchet, and I assume that's his figure there for his peasants to, pay their loyalties to and respect to as they're doing their duty for him. Once I'm done with that, we're going to come back in with a little bit of gold on the knight for that chalice that he's got next to him and also the little beads that hang down. This looks lovely and I'm super satisfied with how the shrines are looking. The last thing that I need to take care of are the shields. We're gonna come back in with that exact same blue and red color tone. We're gonna keep this real simple. We're just gonna divide it down the middle vertically, and on one side we're gonna put blue and on the other side we're going to put red. I really love the way this trebuchet's turned out, but we have a couple more things to do before we can take a look at the final model. It's almost done. There's just 4 things that I need to do, and most of them are because I accidentally forgot them during earlier steps. The one thing that I didn't forget to do, and actually should have been my last step, is applying a Nuln Oil wash to all of the metallics that I painted on both the trebuchet as well as all the figures. I just want to knock back that shininess a little bit, add a little bit of grit and grime to the metals and all of the tools that they have in their hands. And once that's done, I'm looking at it and I'm going, this is super cool. I'm feeling great. And then I look at the peasants and I see the doggo and I look at him and I go, frack, I didn't paint his tabard or the shield on him when I was painting the rest of the shield. So we're gonna pull the blue and red back out and we're going to actually paint those up so that I don't forget them and that he looks glorious and actually matches everything else in the army. And then the final thing that I need to do is I'm looking at the dirt, and while I'm not going to tuff them quite yet because I'm not sure what I wanna do tuft-wise, because I want these guys' bases to match what I'm gonna do on my big terrain board, and I haven't fully sussed out what I wanna do grass-wise for that yet. So we're going to leave them just bare dirt, but I don't want to just leave them as the AK dirt by itself. While it's very nice and has some great textures, it doesn't have a very much like highlights or shadows to it. It's all very matte. So we're going to come back in with a nice light dry brush to bring out a little bit of highlights and allow you to see all that lovely texture that I created. And with that, we can finally take a look at the completed set. And here it is, because I'm not going to hold it. It weighs a ton. It doesn't actually weigh a ton, but it is heavy and I don't want to accidentally chip paint off of it because it's a metal miniature and I'm terrified of that. I don't know how I'm going to actually end up using it on the table and put it in my army because it's actually supposed to be a really good addition to the Bretonnian army, especially if you're getting that. Well, I know, but like I'm still, even then I'm worried though. Even though if I seal it, I'm worried that I'm going to accidentally chip paint off this thing because of all of those sharp, fine edges on all of the wood of the trebuchet itself. I love how this model turned out. It was so much fun and so incredibly frustrating to work on. I like metal miniatures. I think you get some really cool detail out of them because you can do some really like just deep gouges into that metal and get some really just fine detail. And honestly, I had not realized how much all of these little peasants had actually going on them. The fact that they all have like, or half of them have like rats on their belts as a little snack, and then that one guy has like carrots and a rabbit, blows my mind. But I also never want to have to pin together something that heavy ever again, because the assembly process was rough. It was a little rough, I will admit. It took as long as I expected it to, and then even longer because I didn't realize how much the glue wasn't going to dry unless I used the accelerant. Like, that stuff absolutely was a game changer for me, and thank goodness I had some accessible and at home already, because I was doing this like the assembly like late Saturday night or something, and I don't know if I would have been able to go to a game store and pick them up and actually get it done. So I'm very glad I had some. I'm really happy with how this assembly process went, how the painting process went. It was a challenge, and I think I succeeded at that challenge. And that's what this year is really all about for me, is I want to really push myself to do things that I've never done before and try to make my projects grander and bigger and go the extra mile on them. And honestly, I think that I succeeded. You tell me down below, do you think that I went the extra mile on this trebuchet? Is it beyond battle ready? Does it have the highlighting and all of that that you might expect from a classic old world model? Because I think I did pretty well in that regard, but you tell me down below. Before I head out, I do want to give one final thank you to not only my patrons, but also my YouTube members for making it so content like this can continue to happen. Without your guys' support, we would not be doing this, so thank you very much. I have been Angela, and I hope you have a wonderful hobby night.